The Minnesota Lynx thought they had the Indiana Fever figured out until Lexie Hull delivered the ultimate payback that left 20,000 fans on their feet screaming. This wasn't just any regular season finale, this was personal, and what happened in those final moments changed everything about how we view the Fever's playoff chances. Remember when Kayla McBride's elbow connected with Hull's face earlier this season and somehow Hull got called for the foul? Well, Hull just served up ice-cold revenge in the most spectacular way possible, and the timing couldn't have been more perfect. But before we dive into that jaw-dropping moment, smash that like button if you're ready for the Fever's playoff run, and let me know in the comments who you think is their X factor heading into the postseason. Because what this team just accomplished without half their roster is absolutely insane. The Indiana Fever just did something that shouldn't have been possible. They demolished the league-leading Minnesota Lynx 83-72 while missing nearly half their rotation to injuries. Think about that for a second. Caitlin Clark was out with a groin injury that's been nagging her for weeks. Sophie Cunningham sidelined with an MCL tear that happened at the worst possible time. Sydney Colson tore her ACL and her season was done. Chloe Bibby's knee wouldn't hold up under the pressure. Erica Wheeler fractured her foot in practice. That's not just a few role players missing. That's an entire starting lineup worth of talent sitting in street clothes watching from the bench. What happened next would shock everyone in the basketball world. Instead of folding like most teams would, the Fever turned into something completely different. Kelsey Mitchell transformed into an absolute scoring machine, dropping over 20 points per game and breaking franchise records that stood for decades. She didn't just score a little more to fill the void, she became the most productive scorer in Indiana Fever history, surpassing even Tamika Catching's single-season numbers. That's not supposed to happen when you're rookie sensation and half your team disappears, but that wasn't the whole story of this miraculous transformation. Aliyah Boston stepped up in ways nobody saw coming, averaging 15 points and pulling down more than 8 rebounds over her last 10 games. She set a new team record for single-season rebounds while anchoring a defense that had every reason to collapse. When you lose that many players, especially your primary ball handler in Clark, most teams would tank their way to the lottery. The Fever did the exact opposite. The turning point came when head coach Stephanie White made a shocking decision that changed everything. She threw out the traditional playbook and started running sets designed for players who weren't even supposed to see significant minutes. Odyssey Sims, who came in as a hardship signing just weeks ago, suddenly found herself running point and dropping 15 points against the best team in the league. Aerial Powers, who most fans couldn't even name at the start of the season, started draining threes like she was Steph Curry in a Fever jersey. Here's where things get really interesting though. The Minnesota game wasn't just about proving they could compete without their stars, it was about sending a message to the entire league. From the opening tip, Indiana came out like they had something to prove. A 10-0 run to start the game had the Lynx calling timeout before most fans had even found their seats. By halftime, the Fever had built a double-digit lead that felt insurmountable, and Minnesota's shooting went colder than an Indiana winter. 2 made threes out of 20 attempts is the kind of stat line that gets coaches fired, but the Lynx couldn't buy a bucket against this transformed Fever defense. What really exposed the difference between these two teams was the energy level. Minnesota looked like they were already thinking about the playoffs, going through the motions and expecting their talent to carry them through. Indiana played like their season depended on it, diving for loose balls, contesting every shot, and celebrating every basket like it was Game 7 of the finals. The crowd fed off that energy, turning Gainbridge Fieldhouse into the loudest arena in the WNBA for one magical night. But let's get back to that Lexie Hull moment that everyone's still talking about. With 6 minutes left in the third quarter and the Fever up by 12, McBride tried to drive past Hull on the baseline. Hull stayed with her step for step, and when McBride went up for the layup, Hull met her at the rim with a perfectly clean block that sent the ball into the third row. The crowd erupted. Hull stared down McBride for just a second and then sprinted back on defense like nothing happened. It was professional, it was clean, and it was the perfect response to what happened earlier this season. The backstory makes this even more satisfying for Fever fans. In their previous matchup, McBride caught Hull with an elbow to the face that looked intentional on replay. The ref somehow called the foul on Hull, adding insult to injury. Hull didn't complain, didn't retaliate, she just waited, and when her moment came, she delivered in the most professional way possible. No dirty plays, no cheap shots, just pure basketball dominance when it mattered most. This victory means so much more than just ending the regular season on a high note. The Fever locked up the 6th seed in the playoffs, avoiding the play-in tournament and guaranteed guaranteeing themselves at least one home playoff game. For a team that started the season 1-8 and looked completely lost without their injured stars, making the playoffs at all is a miracle. Doing it by beating the best team in the league? That's the kind of momentum that can carry a team on a deep playoff run. What nobody's talking about enough is how this team's chemistry completely transformed over the final weeks of the season. When you lose that many players to injury, most teams fall apart mentally. The Fever did the opposite. Players who barely knew each other's names at the start of the season were suddenly running plays like they'd been teammates for years. The bench celebrations got louder, the defensive rotations got sharper, and suddenly this team that everyone had written off looked dangerous. The statistics tell an incredible story of resilience. Indiana shot 58% from the floor in the first half against Minnesota, the kind of efficiency that championship teams dream about. They held the Lynx to just 72 points, well below their season average, but the most impressive stat might be the assist numbers. 25 assists on 33 made baskets shows a team that's sharing the ball and finding the open player, not just relying on individual talent to carry them. Kelsey Mitchell's transformation deserves its own documentary at this point. She went from being a good scorer to becoming the focal point of every defensive game plan, and she still found ways to dominate. Her ability to create her own shot when the offense broke down saved the Fever season more times than anyone can count. When Caitlin Clark went down and everyone assumed the Fever would struggle to score, Mitchell said, "Hold my basketball," and proceeded to torch every defense in her path. The playoff implications of this hot streak are massive. Instead of limping into the postseason as an easy out, the Fever enter as the hottest team in the league with a 3-game winning streak. They've proven they can beat anyone on any given night, even without their biggest stars. That's the kind of confidence that can turn a 6th seed into a legitimate threat to make noise in the playoffs. But here's what really has the rest of the league worried about facing Indiana in the playoffs. They've become impossible to scout. With so many different players stepping up on any given night, how do you game plan for them? Do you focus on stopping Mitchell and let someone like Sims or Powers beat you? Do you pack the paint against Boston and leave shooters open on the perimeter? Every defensive strategy has a counter when you have this many players capable of having a big night. The coaching job by Stephanie White deserves massive recognition here. Taking a roster decimated by injuries and turning them into a cohesive unit that just dominated the best team in the league is coaching excellence at its finest. Her ability to adapt on the fly, create new rotations out of necessity, and keep the team's morale high when everything was falling apart shows why she's one of the best coaches in the league. What makes this even more impressive is the youth movement happening in Indiana. Most of these players stepping up are either rookies or second-year players who weren't supposed to be ready for this kind of pressure. The fact that they're thriving in these moments suggests the Fever's future is incredibly bright, even beyond just having Caitlin Clark as their cornerstone. The psychological impact of this win can't be overstated either. Minnesota came in expecting an easy victory against a depleted roster. Instead, they got punched in the mouth from the opening tip and never recovered. That's the kind of loss that can mess with the team's confidence heading into the playoffs, while Indiana enters feeling like they can beat anyone, anywhere, at any time. Looking ahead to the playoffs, the Fever's first-round matchup suddenly doesn't look as daunting as it did a week ago. Whether they face Connecticut, Las Vegas, or whoever else, they've proven they have the defense to slow down elite offenses and the offensive firepower to keep up with anyone. Add in the fact that they might get some injured players back for the playoffs, and suddenly this 6th seed looks incredibly dangerous. The crowd at Gainbridge Fieldhouse deserves credit too. 20,000 fans showed up for a regular season finale when the team was already locked into their playoff position. They could have stayed home and rested up for the playoffs, but instead they packed the arena and created an atmosphere that felt like a playoff game. That kind of home court advantage is going to be huge when the actual playoffs begin. But let's not forget the bigger picture here. This Fever team just showed the entire WNBA what Indiana basketball is all about. Grit, determination, and never giving up no matter how bad things look. They could have mailed it in when the injuries piled up. They could have accepted their fate as an early playoff exit. Instead, they fought harder, played smarter, and proved that heart can overcome talent on any given night. The individual performances in this game were spectacular across the board. Mitchell's 24 points led the way, but 6 different Fever players scored in double figures. That kind of balanced scoring is exactly what you want to see heading into the playoffs, where defenses key in on stopping your best player. When everyone's a threat, nobody can be stopped. What's really fascinating is how this team's identity completely shifted without their injured stars. They went from being a fast-paced, high-scoring team built around Clark's playmaking to a defensive-minded, balanced attack that grinds out victories. That versatility and adaptability is going to serve them well in the playoffs, where different styles of play can win on different nights. The revenge factor with Lexie Hull adds another layer to this story. Professional athletes always say they don't care about individual matchups or revenge games, but Hull's performance said otherwise. She didn't just want to beat McBride, she wanted to dominate her in every aspect of the game. Mission accomplished. As the Fever head into the playoffs, they're not just playing with house money anymore. They're a legitimate threat to pull off an upset or two. Teams that get hot at the right time and have nothing to lose are always dangerous in the playoffs. Add in the fact that they've already proven they can beat the best team in the league, and suddenly that 6th seed doesn't look so bad. The transformation of this team from laughingstock to playoff threat is one of the best stories in sports this year. They lost everything that was supposed to make them competitive and somehow got better. They faced adversity that would break most teams and used it as motivation. They took players nobody wanted and turned them into contributors who could start for half the teams in the league. If you think this Fever team is done surprising people, you haven't been paying attention. Drop a comment below with your prediction for how far they'll go in the playoffs, and don't forget to subscribe for complete coverage of what promises to be an incredible playoff run. Because if this regular season finale taught us anything, it's that counting out the Indiana Fever is a massive mistake. They've got the momentum, they've got the confidence, and most importantly, they've got absolutely nothing to lose. That's a dangerous combination in the playoffs, and the rest of the WNBA better be ready for what's coming.